Hello Rayclass, welcome to the Path of Exile build guide for the Ultimate Zoo Summoner Necromancer build. This build, as you can see, summons both skeletons and zombies along with a few specters. Build features average clear speed, though it is very steady and nice clear speed. It's a very relaxing gameplay style. It has excellent single target damage and is very survivable in most content, though as you'll see there are a couple of fights you kind of need to look out for. I don't cherry pick runs when I'm putting together these build guides, so there's deaths in some of the more dangerous content in the guides in this video, which is intentional. I like to show the videos as they actually are. The build is hardcore viable if you want to stay away from some of those more dangerous encounters. It is an excellent relaxing mapping character. It takes down all regular map bosses very easily and very quickly, and there's basically no risk of you dying because the giant meat wall that's around you all the time. So we will go ahead and start off with the items for this character. We will begin with the unique items. This build uses a whole lot of them. Most of them are pretty easy to get. In the upper left we've got the Baron here. This is a Baron build obviously, which means we are stacking as much strength as possible. Although Baron did get nerfed a couple leagues ago, it is still a very strong item if you want to build around it, particularly when you're going zombie mode. Gives you that nice leech that is otherwise pretty much unavailable to summoners, which helps us to stay alive really well, and of course it lets us get a lot more zombies, and gives them a nice damage and health boost, which also applies to our skeletons as well. Next up we've got Femurs of the Saints. This isn't strictly mandatory to use, you could use whatever kind of weapons you want, but I think you definitely want a two-hander, so you can go for 6 links for both your zombies and skeletons. And Femurs of the Saints is just really strong. We've got a whole lot of skeletons and a whole lot of zombies, so we get a lot of bonuses from it. The minion regen helps them stay alive really well, and the +2 level of socketed minion gems is really nice for putting our zombies in there because it helps them stay alive a lot better. Next up on the bottom left is Alberon's Warpath. This is pretty much a staple in any Baron build because of the large percentage strength bonus it gives. Go for one with that maximum 18% roll. They're pretty cheap even with the max roll, and it gives us an extra skeleton, which is of course very nice. The only downside to Alberon's Warpath is that it's only at 20% move speed, but that's not a big deal and it's definitely still worth using. Next up is Astra Mentis. This is another staple of pretty much every Baron build. We use a lot of these following jewels you'll see to convert attributes and stuff on the tree. So the Astra Mentis not only gives us a bunch of strength, but it also helps fill out our dexterity and intelligence, which we convert a lot of into strength, which means we need some extra to be able to fill out gem requirements. Next up we've got Violent Dead. You'll want 2 of these. These are really good for your zombies, especially with the new reworked Necromancer Ascendency. You combine the 2 Violent Dead jewels with the new zombie Necromancer node, and it makes it so your zombies pretty much only ever slam, and their slams cannot miss anymore because of the new Necromancer node. So these are really strong. Next up is 3 Brawn Jewels. On these you want to shoot for the largest increased strength roll and the largest reduced the lowest induced intelligence rolls you can get. The strength is the biggest priority with the Astra Mentis. You should have enough intelligence to still use everything you need to, so it's not a huge deal, but if possible, just to have more mana and stuff, you want to try and get as little reduced intelligence as possible. And then next up we've got 2 efficient training jewels, which we use to convert large amounts of intelligence into strength on the tree, which helps us hit the different strength caps that we need, that we will talk about a little bit later in the gearing section. Next up is our rare items for the build. I just mentioned that there's a couple of strength thresholds we're trying to hit, so you definitely want as much strength as possible in every single gear slot. And of course your number 1 priority though is capping out your resists, but beyond that, as much life and as much strength as you can possibly get. You definitely need to hit at least 1,000 strength so that you get the life leech from your zombies on the Baron Helm, but beyond that you really want to try to get over 1,200 so that you get another extra zombie. You can see here in the upper left, starting with our chest armor, we managed to score a really nice one on this character with a whole lot of life and strength. And you want an open prefix if you can, so you can Katarina craft on 1 maximum number of zombie. With that and the fact that we hit over 1,200 strength, that gets us up to 15 total zombies. Next up we've got our gloves, again just strength, life, resistances. You'll see a similar theme through all this gear, both of our rings, just strength and life, and enough resistances to cap out. It might seem like it's hard to cap out your resistances because we use so many unique items and we don't have a whole lot of room for rares, but you gotta remember, we get quite a bit of all resistance on the tree just because of the way we path through the tree, and we get a really big bonus of 20 all resists from the Necromancer node for being affected by our own Clarity Aura. So you get a whole lot of free resistance, so it's really not that hard to cap out your resistances, even though you don't have a whole lot of rare slots open. Over on the right here, you absolutely want a Stygian Vice on this build because there's one particular Stygian Jewel mod that we really want. And that is, as you can see on the jewel here, we've got that important minions have 4% chance to blind on hit with attacks. It doesn't really matter what roll you get on that, you just want a chance to blind on hit with attacks. Your minions hit a lot really fast because we've got a ton of them. So even like a 2% roll, I think, is as low as it goes. Will still pretty much blind stuff instantly. But that is a huge defensive boost, not only for your minion, or not only for you, but also for your minions. It really helps them stay alive against strong attackers like Minotaur and other similar things. So I definitely think you want a Stygian Vice in this build. All our jewel sockets on the tree are sucked up with more important things, so you don't want to have to stick one of these jewels in the tree. So definitely shoot for that Stygian Vice, and again, as you can see, it's just as much life and strength as possible. And we managed to hit a nice little reduced flask charges used on this one. The flasks in this build are pretty much wide open and up to preference because we don't actually use any unique flasks in this build, so you can really use whatever utility flasks you like. You can see what I'm using here. I start with the staple in most of my builds, which is the Catalyzed Eternal Life Flask. And I rolled animation on this. It's just nice to give your zombies a little life boost and maybe make it so you don't have to resummon skeletons quite as often on bosses, though big things are going to one-shot your skeletons if they get hit anyways, so it's not really a big deal, but might as well go animation on there since we're using so many blue flasks. We've got plenty of room for utility affixes. Next up, I've got a Saturated Divine Mana Flask of Staunching. You want Staunching somewhere, it can go wherever. I just stuck it on this Mana Flask, and the reason I chose to run a Mana Flask is just because zombies are really expensive, and so it's nice to be able to have some mana so you can resummon them more reliably in fights if you need to. Next up is a Chemist Granite Flask of Iron Skin, and that combined with the following Chemist Basalt Flask just gives us a really nice amount of physical damage resistance. Protects us from any little stray hits flying out of packs from ranged enemies, and it's really nice if you take the occasional hit from something like a Minotaur or a Chimera or whatever. On the Basalt Flask here, I've rolled Warding. I like to have Warding in all of my builds, that way you can just ignore curse mods on maps and any dangerous curses from potential bosses. And like I said, we've got plenty of affixes open in this build, so you might as well roll a Warding Flask. And then, of course, we follow up with a Quicksilver of Adrenaline. I've only got Perpetual here. Ideally, you would probably have Chemists here as well, but I just never managed to roll one. But Quicksilver Adrenaline just gets you around really fast. Ups your mapping clear speed, helps you dodge stuff on bosses since we don't have room for a movement skill, so you definitely want one of these in your build somewhere. Now we will go ahead and look at the passive tree for this character. If you've ever seen or played a Baron character before, this will look pretty familiar to you. If you're not familiar with the idea behind Baron, basically just like any other minion build, you're going to grab all of the main minion wheels. But then instead of getting things like curse effectiveness or extra auras or whatever beyond that, instead you're going to focus on just getting as much strength as you possibly can. So we start by heading north out of the Witch area. We head over to the Grave Intentions wheel. Head down to the jewel socket there to the right of the Witch area to grab Efficient Training in that jewel slot. That converts all the intelligence that we got there into strength. You might want to just skip the jewels for a while you're leveling and instead focus on the ones for Violent Dead and not worry about going Baron right away. Head north up to that jewel slot. The jewel slot just to the north of the Witch is where you're going to put your first Violent Dead jewel. Save heading up to the extra Spectre node until later, and for now head south over towards the Templar area to grab Herd the Flock and Puppet Master. To the south, or just to the left there again of the Witch area, is where our second Efficient Training jewel will eventually go. Hook down under the Templar area to go through all the strength and grab the Grave Pact wheel. Basically while you're leveling, you want to head to the minion wheels as quickly as possible just to get more summons. Don't worry so much about the strength stuff while leveling. Of course, we go down through the nice Scion Life wheel and eventually head down to Brawn in that bottom jewel slot. Our three southernmost jewel slots are where all three of our Brawn jewels are going because we're already in a strength area, so you're not going to be converting anything with Efficient Training. So that is where you want to slap your Brawn jewels. And again, the reason we're going down into that Marauder area and Scion area is just to grab as much strength as possible. You probably wouldn't head down there on a non-Baron minion build. And then from there on, you just want to start filling out all of your strength as you level, grab the life nodes, and eventually do head up and grab that Death Attunement wheel for a second Spectre and the other minion life and damage stuff around there. And finally, you want to finish off by grabbing Physique and Might, which are just those big 30 strength nodes. And that'll round out your passive tree, give you as much strength as you can get, while still hitting all of those important minion wheels. If you can find ways to optimize the tree, sure, go ahead and do it. This is what I came up with and what has seemed to work the best for me. So now we will take a quick look at the Ascendency choices for this build. Of course, as mentioned previously, we have chosen the Necromancer for our assembly, which is your no-brainer choice for pretty much any summoner build. Head down south to Invoker at the start just to get some general minion damage bonuses, and then I started out with Fleshbinder to pump up my zombies because they're the most useful thing while you're leveling. Then go ahead and grab Bone Sculptor to turbocharge your skeletons, and finally, or initially I had grabbed the Puppet Master node to the right because it gives really nice minion damage and speed and stuff, but eventually I decided that I needed to switch that over to Commander of Darkness because your zombies really benefit from the extra resistances. Getting that along with the other nodes we got on the tree gets your zombies up to max resistances, which is really important, otherwise they just get obliterated by way too many AoE things. And as we mentioned in the gearing section, you don't have a whole lot of room for rares in this build, so the extra 20% resists on yourself is really nice as well. Makes it so you can shoot for more strength and stuff on your gear instead of having to worry so hard about capping your resistances. Finally, we will go ahead and look at the gem links for this character. Of course, your main two setups are going to be your zombies and skeletons. I believe I mentioned in the gearing sections, I chose to stick the zombies in the Femurs of the Saints because they benefit the most from the extra levels since they are your persistent minions. You want the extra levels to give them as much life as possible so you're not having to resummon them so often, and they really never die except against the endgame fights. During regular mapping, you're never going to lose any zombies, so it's not a big deal, but I think they are best in the Femurs of the Saints. The 6th link for the zombies is going to be Raised Zombie, Minion Damage, Ruthless, Melee Fizz, Concentrated Effect, and Multi-Strike. We use Concentrated Effect because between the two Violent Dead Jewels and the Necromancer nodes, our zombies only ever slam, so Conc Effect is just a really big damage boost for them because their slam is an AoE attack. If you're only on a 5 link, ditch Ruthless. If you go to if you want to make your zombies a little beefier, it'll sacrifice a little damage but will give them more health, you can switch out Ruthless for Empower. Same on your skeletons, you can switch out Multi-Strike for Empower on your skeletons. You need the Multi-Strike on your zombies to ensure that they slam due to the slam cooldown. If you don't use the Multi-Strike, then they will regular attack sometimes. I just felt like I didn't want to invest any more currency in this build. It had already gotten pretty expensive with the level of gear I'd gone for, and I didn't want to go for Empower 4s. At just an Empower 3, I don't think it's worth it, but if you did get an Empower 4, it would only cost you a tiny bit of damage to swap out Ruthless for the Empower 4, but would give your minions a lot more health, so that definitely might be worth it if you really want to go to the sky with this build and try to make your zombies a little more resilient in the super endgame fights. But like I said, I just chose not to go that way. I didn't want to invest any more currency in the build. For the skeletons, you want Summon Skeleton, Ruthless, Minion Damage, Maim. You want Maim on one of your 2 minions because it will up the damage of all your minions. I just chose to put it on the skeletons. It could go on the zombies, I suppose. Then you also want Melee Fizz and Melee Splash for clearing. On bosses, you're going to swap out Melee Splash for Multi-Strike on your skeletons. And like I said, if you wanted to try and get more life and sacrifice a little bit of damage, you could swap out Multi-Strike for Empower instead. Then we'll go into our utility setups. We've got a Raised Spectre and an Animate Guardian attached to minion life and blood damage, and blood magic rather. The reason for the blood magic is because we are using Carnage Chieftain Spectres, as you can see in the clear footage. They grant frenzy charges to all your minions, but they have a very tiny mana pool. So if you don't link them to blood magic, they tend to not use their frenzy spell very often, and your minions will not have very reliable frenzy charges. The Animate Guardian, you can use whatever you want on this. I'm using a Singularity Scepter on him because it slows everything around him with a Hinder, which is really nice. I'm using the Oak Shield and Blood Bond Armor, which together make him really tanky. Also throw some Southbound Gloves on there. You want Victario's Flight Boots, as they have a speed aura on them, which applies to your other minions and you as well. And then I went with good old Learcast for the helmet, just to give a small damage boost to everything. And minion life is in there just to make sure your specters and guardians don't die. They are really, really tanky. Next up, we've got hatred attached to generosity. You don't care about your hatred affecting you, so you want the generosity in there to make it more effective for your minions. And then you need a desecrate somewhere. Make sure you level up that desecrate. If your specters are dying a lot, you probably want to check the gem level on your desecrate. Desecrate only creates corpses of a certain level, which is tied to its gem level, so you need to level it up to be able to create high level corpses to raise high level specters. And then we've got convocation thrown in here as well. If your minions are falling behind you or whatever, or you need to pull them out of a big AoE attack, just go ahead and convocate them to you. Finally, we've got Flesh Offering. Just spam that as you're going through maps. It'll pump up all your minions and make them real fast. We've got a vulnerability there, increased duration. The increased duration is mostly for the Flesh Offering rather than the vulnerability, though it does affect both. And then finally we've got a clarity. It doesn't really matter what level you have the clarity at. The clarity is mostly just there to give you the 20% all resistances from the Necromancer node. But you can level it up as high as you can and still maintain a good mana pool, and it'll give you a good bit of extra regen, so you're not having to worry about popping your mana potions all the time for your skeletons. And you really only ever need to pop your mana potions when you're resummoning zombies. That mostly does it for the details of the build. I'll just take a few minutes here and talk about some other things you might want to consider if you're running this build. I mentioned earlier that certain fights are really difficult for the build, but the build is hardcore viable if you avoid some of those. The fights you want to avoid are Uber Elder. As you can see, I die a lot on the Uber Elder fight in this video. In fact, I only get him on the very last portal. One thing that made it a lot harder, and made some other fights much harder as well, is that I was focusing too much on trying to keep my zombies alive, rather than dodging the things in the fight. If your zombies die, you should pretty much just accept it. Yeah, you're going to lose the leech from them, which is kind of a big deal, but you'll probably stay alive a lot longer if you just focus on dodging things and resummoning skeletons, instead of trying to resummon your zombies mid-fight like I was. So don't focus too hard on your zombies. They are a big part of your damage and survivability, but you're definitely going to die if you are just getting hit by all the massive AoE attacks because you're focusing too hard on trying to resummon them. The other fights that are really difficult for this build are Ubertziri. She just does massive AoE damage, which blasts your minions really quick. And your minion AI sometimes isn't the greatest on the split phase. As you can see in the video, I'll show Ubertziri at some point in this video. Vols die really fast and easy, the trio dies really fast and easy, but Ziri herself is just kind of a pain, too much AoE stuff blowing up your minions. But it is doable, of course. I've cleared all the content in the game on this build, but some of them definitely really hard if you want to be doing it deathless, so you should avoid those on hardcore. As far as Elder and his guardians go, they're really easy. I don't show them in this video, and hardly anyone even shows them in build guides these days because they're just kind of joke fights for most builds. As far as Shaper's guardians go, Minotaur and Chimera are both extremely easy. You could definitely do those on hardcore. I've killed a ton of them on this character and never died on either one of those. Shaper himself is also really easy if you're familiar with the fight. You might lose some zombies if you're not convocating them out of slams and beams properly, but it's not a big deal. Even just your skeletons alone do plenty of damage to take out Shaper, and so you can just resummon zombies in the intermediate phases. So Shaper you can definitely do on hardcore with this build. Phoenix and Hydra can be a bit difficult. I think you'll see I die in the Phoenix fight on this video. Basically, again, I think on those it mostly comes down to don't worry much about your zombies dying. Convocate them out of Phoenix Blasts if you can, but mostly focus on dodging the mechanics of the fight yourself and just summoning your skeletons. And you'll probably have a bit better time staying alive than I did, but those are still fights that I would probably stay away from on hardcore with this build. As far as Pantheon choices for this build go, you can pretty much do whatever you want. There aren't a whole lot of Pantheons that help the build a ton. Soul the Brine King is an obvious choice, I think, because we don't have any stun immunity built into the build, and I did capture the Puruna upgrade for it to make it so we also can't be chain frozen. Your minor Ascendancy is really a toss-up. I went with Soul of Vrislotha just to have my life flasks recharge over time, and you definitely want to upgrade that with the Goreless Will Thief Soul to get 60% increased life recovery from flasks when used on low life. Just a disclaimer I'll throw in at the end here, as I do with all of my builds. My build guides are just that, they're guides, they're not hard and fast rules. If you think there's a way to improve them, do it. I get a lot of comments and stuff on videos, and I've mentioned that I'm happy to answer them, but they get a little out of hand sometimes. People are like, well, can I change this? Can I change this? And it's like, yes, of course you can. You don't have to ask me. If you think there's a way to make the build better, just do it. I probably haven't tested all the things you have, so I might not even be able to give you an accurate answer. So just do whatever you want with the builds. My guides are more to be inspiration rather than hard and fast rules to tell you how to play the game. So enjoy the game the way you like to. Use these guides as inspiration, change them however you see fit, and you might come up with something better than I did. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and thumbs up if you want to see more content. Make sure you turn on your little notification bell, as it's getting harder and harder to see your YouTube subscribers' content these days, it seems. So make sure you get that bell on if you want to see new content. Check out the other videos on the channel if you want to see some other cool build guides. And just be inspired. Go out and try stuff, try different things. Don't worry about the meta or what other people are doing. Just try to make something fun and interesting and enjoy the game however the way you like to. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all in Raycast.